Hello guys, Nat Blue here, and today is going to be the last video of spooky season. So we are going to finish this off with a tier list of my favorite villains from different types of horror movies. Really excited to jump into this one. I don't get to do as many tier lists as I used to, so I'm stoked to kick this off with a vampire. Such a good pick from the beginning. I think a vampire S tier villain. Some of the best horror movies are vampires. Dracula is decent. I mean, they've had a lot of iterations at this point. There's also things like House of a Thousand Corpses, which was an amazing movie. Underworld, which I don't know if you would consider a horror movie. Stuff like that. Well, I just love vampires. I think they're one of my favorite types of villains just in any media. I've used a lot of vampires in D&D. I'm just such a big fan. I am in a Course of Strahd campaign as a player, and I'm so excited because I know it's like the big vampire campaign for the system. But love vampires. I'm not a huge Dracula fan, didn't like the book that much, but I do really enjoy vampires. One of the better vampire books, or a decent vampire book I've read, is I Am Legend, which oddly enough, they don't make it apparent enough in the movie that those are vampires. I've had that conversation with so many people. I feel like they could have made it a little bit more apparent that those are vampires. Next, we have dolls. So this is Slappy the doll from Goosebumps. Probably my favorite doll. Other examples would be Chucky, Bride of Chucky, Annabelle, Brom from The Boy, dolls like that. I'm not a big fan of The Boy, but I think dolls just are such a good villain. I think they're also going to S tier. We're starting this list off so strong, but I think dolls also going to S tier. And I think part of the reason they're so creepy is because they're kind of connected with children, which means they should be more innocent, and I think that adds to it a little bit for me. They need to make like a mannequin horror movie. If they have one, I haven't seen it, but I think it would be terrifying to see a horror movie with like living mannequins. Not Night at the Museum. That's a comedy, but you know what I mean. Next is zombies. Zombies are such a classic villain. They're in so many movies. Night of the Living Dead. They're in the Walking Dead show. So many movies. I think they're also in a lot of comedy movies. I do love a zombie movie. It's not my favorite, so I'm going to put it into A. I think there's a lot of zombie movies that I'm just not a fan of. I wasn't a huge fan of World War Z. I think it was well done, but wasn't a huge fan of the movie. Next, we have mummies. Every time I see a mummy, I think of two things: the Mummy movies starring Brendan Fraser, the Mummy from Hotel Transylvania. I'm going to put this into B. So the Mummy movies starring Brendan Fraser are amazing. I have nothing against Hotel Transylvania. The Mummy movie starring Tom Cruise is bad. So it's going to go into B. I think the Mummy movie starring Tom Cruise had potential. The biggest mistake was trying to make it an expanded universe right off the bat. I think if they hadn't focused on making a monster universe right away, the movie would have come out a lot better. I think that was the biggest mistake that Universal could have made. I think it's ridiculous that they cast characters, like they cast actors for the other characters before the movie released. Like I think Johnny Depp was supposed to play somebody. It's just weird that they had things cast that quickly. Next is the Invisible Man. I don't know if this is necessarily a common villain. I'm not a huge fan of the Invisible Man. I don't like H.G. Wells books that much. I'm not a big sci-fi guy. I'm going to put this into C. I don't think this is used very often either, which is kind of another issue with it. Then we have serial killers. I picked Hannibal Lecter for this. Love serial killer movies. I'm going to put this into A. Silence of the Lambs is amazing. There's the big slasher movies, so like Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween, stuff like that. I think because of that, it deserves the respect of an A tier ranking. I'm just, I think as a horror movie, it just isn't as scary as a lot of things on this list. It's mostly jump scares and stuff. I'm more of a fan of like psychological horror. Then we have animals. So this is Jaws. I think the shark's name is Bruce or something. Another example would be like Cujo, Bunnicula, um, things along those lines, where the villain of the movie is the animal. And I really love this trope. Anaconda's a big one. Snakes on a Plane would be a decent one. I mean, Snakes on a Plane, I don't know if that's considered scary either. Anaconda, I know, is supposed to be scary. There's that movie a few years ago that came out with like the alligators swimming in the water. I forget the name of it, but I do love a movie where the villain is an animal. So I think I'm going to also put this into A. I love these movies, but like there's also examples like Sharknado and stuff where it's not as well done. Next on this list is the Leprechaun. He's played by Warwick Davis. I am not putting him on this list as just a Leprechaun. I think that would be insane because I've only seen one series of movies where the Leprechaun is the villain, and that's his movies. So I'm going to put him into S though, because for me, this is going to represent the Fae. So things like the Leprechaun. I think there was a witchy movie recently that was actually some Fae thing. Things like Darkness Falls, where it's a tooth fairy. I know that it wasn't a real Fae, but stuff like that where it's like fairies are the villain or a Fae creature is the villain. I love that. I'm such a big fan of the Fae. If you've watched any of my other videos about D&D, I talk a lot about the Fae Wild, which is a big part of D&D. I love the Fae. I love Fae creatures, and I think that that trickster aspect of a Fae adds to horror so well because they can use magic, illusions, um, sometimes actual tricks. I would say for Darkness Falls, an example would be something like blowing out light bulbs and stuff like that. If you guys haven't seen Darkness Falls, because I know a lot of people haven't, I didn't realize the movie wasn't as popular as I thought it was until a couple years ago. You need to watch that movie. It's such a good movie. I loved it so much. It has such a special place in my heart. It was one of the first scary movies I watched, and I am such a big fan. Then we have witches, kind of similar to Fae, sometimes very similar to Fae. Sometimes the witches are technically Fae creatures, and like examples like Baba Yaga and stuff like that. I'm going to put witches into B, and that hurts me. I'm such a fan of witches and hags and stuff along those lines, but I don't think they're as widely used as they should be. Wizard of Oz is not a scary movie, but there's some examples. I know there was one a few years ago where it was like a Bible witch was the villain. I didn't get to watch it. There was only a few years before that. Maybe called The Witch. I don't think witches are used as often as they used to be. I think that's sad. But at the same time, I think a lot of people are going away from witches because there are religious people that identify themselves as witches. Maybe it's a cultural thing where they don't want to upset anybody, but I do really like a witch as a villain. Then we have aliens. Oddly enough, I'm putting aliens into C. I have not watched a scary movie with aliens that I love. I'm not a huge fan of the alien movies. So like Aliens, that weird one that's technically a prequel that it was okay, but really didn't have much to do with the xenomorph. I haven't seen Alien Romulus. I'm told it's really good. I'm just not a huge fan of that type of franchise. I'm not a huge fan of sci-fi. I look like I'm a big sci-fi guy. I look like I love space stuff. Um, but I'm more of like a fantasy kind of nerd, and sci-fi is just not my thing. Then we have clowns. This is specifically Pennywise. I don't need to be wearing headphones. This is specifically Pennywise, but I don't know if Pennywise should really be in this conversation because he's technically an alien, maybe a demon. It's weird. But clowns as villains, I'm going to put them into C. Now, hear me out. I have not watched Terrifier 1, 2, or 3. I don't think I've even watched Clowns from Outer Space or whatever it's called, Evil Clowns from Outer Space. I don't find clowns scary. And I know that's a personal thing. I understand a lot of people find clowns scary. I don't find clowns scary. And I think because of that, I can't put them high up on the list. Like, I just haven't watched a movie where I'm like, "Oh, that clown is terrifying." It's not my thing. Then we have doppelgangers. This picture is from Us. This is one of my favorite horror movies to come out in the last few years, maybe longer than a few years. I watched this for the first time a few months ago. If I'm being completely transparent, watched it for the first time a few months ago. Loved this movie. And I think doppelgangers just add a different type of terror to a movie or any medium because you always have to have that fear of, is there a doppelganger in the group? And then there's the situations like what happens in Us a few times where you just run into your own doppelgangers. And then you're faced with the fact that there's a lookalike just staring you down. I love doppelgangers. I think it's just such a good tactic to use to scare somebody. I'm a huge fan. Then we have possessed people. So possessions. This is from The Exorcist. I don't know her name. I haven't watched The Exorcist since I was like 10 years old. I'm going to put this into A. I think possessions are one of the scariest things to do in a movie. And it's better than things like Ghost and stuff, which we'll get to in a moment, because it has that human aspect to it. And I think that really adds a little bit of extra depth there. Just seeing like the body horror of people's heads spinning around, people vomiting, blood coming out of their different orifices, stuff like that, I think just makes the characters so much more terrifying. And I love it. So then we have this guy. Now, this is The Mist. I am using this as an example of Eldritch horrors. So, like Cthulhu, stuff like that. Mostly the unknown. This is going into S for me. And this is going pretty high S for me. Because that fear of the unknown, like the creature in the mist, in this particular instance, I think you might be able to argue for things like It Follows being an Eldritch horror. Maybe things like Quiet, Quiet Place, Board Box, stuff like that, where it's a mostly unseen entity. Quiet Place might be a little bit of a stretch, but I think if done right, this is one of the scariest ways to tell a story. I think it might be one of the best ways to tell psychological horror because you're anticipating that scare. It doesn't always come very quickly. It kind of builds anticipation, which I really like. Then we have werewolves. I think werewolves are not a strong one on this list. If I'm being honest, I don't think werewolves are used in horror very well. I'm going to put them C. So my issue with werewolves is they're not used very often anymore. And if they are, it's like the Wolfman. It's not the stereotypical werewolf. There are werewolves in media that I wouldn't consider scary, like Underworld and stuff, that I think are done really well. Werewolves in Underworld are one of my favorite parts of Underworld, but I don't think they're scary, and I don't think they're used to be scary most of the time. And it can be done well in other mediums, so like video games, TTRPGs, stuff like that. But I think if you're talking about movies, it's not the best. Next, we have children. Now, this is from Children of the Corn. Other examples would be like The Omen. This is an S tier, guys. This might be the best one. Something about the assumed innocence of the kid just makes it so much scarier. Like they do such a good job with it sometimes. And I love the like children villains, especially Children of the Corn. Children of the Corn is really good. Next is skeletons. They're a D tier. I should have changed it to F at this point. They're just not great villains, if I'm being honest, because you don't see them often to scare people unless it's like a children's cartoon. You know, you're not seeing skeletons in the same capacity as anybody else on this list. They're just not meant to be scary. And I think that just takes away from it too much to be higher up on the list. Then we have like I'm going to consider these guys constructs. So like Frankenstein, the one of the characters from American Horror Story, Coven, stuff like that, where it's a creature that was made by technology or magic. Technically, Chucky might be in this conversation because he was magically put into the doll, but that's kind of a stretch. I don't know. how you would consider that because he's still possessing it, but like a Flash Golem kind of situation. I think this goes into. I think it goes into C. I think this is more fascinating than scary. Is it Marie or Mary Shelley? Hooked with Frankenstein. Let's be honest, she did a great job, but I think it's more fascinating to me. I don't get scared by Frankenstein, but then again, most of the great Frankenstein movies were done so long ago. And I think older horror movies just don't hold up as well because you're used to seeing that more realistic effect nowadays. Next, we have Ghost. I think Ghost are going to go right beside Possessed People. And I think directly beside Possessed People because they're kind of neck and neck. Like I said, I really like the human aspect of possession because it just makes it feel a little closer to home. Ghosts are close though, because you could imagine your house being, you know? And there's some really good ghost movies. There's such good ghost movies. There, I think some of the biggest scary movies are centered around Ghost. And I think because of that, you've got to count them into one of these top two tiers. But I don't like them as much as anything in S tier. And I still like a good exorcism more. Like a good possession, I think, is still better than a ghost. Lastly, we have demons. I'm going to put them right beside ghost. I think it's also neck and neck because sometimes people think that they're dealing with a ghost. And a lot of the times, a demon possesses somebody, like in Evil Dead. So I mean, those are deadites. I don't know the lore behind Evil Dead, but I love demons in media. I shouldn't just flat out say I like demons. But I love them as villains. I like Ghost and Possessed People more, and I really like everybody that was in S tier more. We are going to add one more here, um, which only a few people will get. Let's be honest, because this is a very niche one. And I'm fine with that, but I don't know if you guys are fine with that. I heard about this guy on a podcast. I will reveal the podcast in a moment. I heard about this guy on a podcast and I dug into him. I haven't watched a lot of this stuff. I dug into him. But when I dug into him, he was so fascinating. I watched some reviews of some movies he was in. He's voiced by Gary Busey, I think, which is insane. I am talking about the Ginger Dead Man. And the Ginger Dead Man is derisive. Anybody that has watched Distractable knows what derisive is. Distractable, knows who the Ginger Dead Man is. Distractable is a podcast put on by Markiplier and his friends Bob and Wade. I should put them all together. Markiplier, Bob and Wade. Markiplier, Lord Minion 777, and Maestro have a podcast called Distractable. If you haven't watched it, highly recommend it. One of my favorite podcasts. I'm an avid listener. I think I've listened to every episode, watched most of them because they've started posting video podcast on Spotify. So if you have a Spotify, watch it on Spotify. But they have an entire episode where they put villains against each other. And they discuss how derisive the Ginger Dead Man is and how that means he should win every fight. His villain fandom page actually lists one of his hobbies as being derisive, facetious, and callous. So you've gotta put him under derisive. He's just the most derisive person on this list. And I think that means he beats everybody on it. To be fair, we maybe should have put derisive at the top. Anybody who doesn't watch Distractable, I'm so sorry that I went into somebody else's bit for this. I didn't come up with this. I don't remember which one of them did come up with this. I think it was Mark and Bob, but it could have been Wade and Bob. I don't remember who was hosting the episode, but I think it was Mark and Bob because that sounds like a Mark and Bob thing to do. It was not Wade and Bob. I don't know why I said Wade and Bob. It might have been Wade and Mark. I think it was a Mark and Bob thing. I'm pretty sure. Correct me in the comments if you know in the comments. Speaking of the comments, If you disagree with anybody anything or anybody I put on this tier list, let me know. Look, you're not going to change my opinion. I know that people aren't going to agree with this list. I mean, I put Ghost and Zombies in A tier instead of S tier. I understand that. But I would love to hear your guys' opinions. If you agree with me, I would love to hear your opinions. Something that YouTube doesn't tell you is you're allowed to leave positive comments. It just doesn't get brought up often. You're allowed to. You're allowed to leave positive comments. But I would love to hear you guys' comments in the comment section. This is our tier list. I love it. There's a lot of people in A and S. I knew this was going to happen because I didn't have a lot of negatives to say about a lot of these characters, but I loved doing this. I love doing tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed this. As spooky season is ending, I should be able to get some more under my belt. I should be able to play regular games again. Also, big elephant in the room. I hope you guys liked my Jaskier outfit for the last day of spooky season. I wanted to go out with a bang. So I put on a costume that doesn't fit as well as it used to. If I'm being completely honest, the last like 3 buttons unbuttoned. We don't need to talk about it. The last 3 buttons unbuttoned. Because I've gained a little bit of weight. And you know what? That happens as you get older. I hope you guys liked the video though. And if you did like the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to. You know, it's free, it's fun. We have fun here. I have fun here. I don't know if you have fun here. I shouldn't assume that, but I have fun here. Hit the notification bell if you want to see videos as I release them. I try to keep a pretty consistent release schedule, but sometimes I mess up. Everybody messes up. So it's always nice to have that notification bell turned on. That way, if I do mess up, you can be like, oh, this guy uploaded on a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday. Or this guy uploaded on a Thursday instead of a Friday. I don't know why I'm always doing the day before, because normally I upload late, like a Tuesday instead of a Monday. But I'm done rambling. I hope everybody's having a great day. I hope everybody has a spooky Halloween because it's tomorrow as of the day that this gets released. And other than that, until next time, peace.